Welcome back to Amigurumi 101. In this video, I'll be explaining increases and invisible decreases. So what are increases and invisible decreases used for? They're used to shape your amigurumi so that they either become wider or more narrow. In this example, I used evenly spaced increases, starting from row 1 over here, so that the bottom of this piece flared out very evenly, and then I used evenly spaced invisible decreases in order to make this top part taper inward. In a very similar fashion, I used increases that were evenly spaced to create this uniform ball shape toward the beginning, and then at the end of these pieces, I used invisible decreases, evenly spaced again, to taper them off, so I ended up with circular spherical pieces. All right, so that's what happens when you use invisible decreases and increases in a uniform way. You end up with a very symmetrical looking piece. In contrast, you don't always have to do that. So over here, around the eyeballs, I used increases that were evenly spaced in order to create, again, that circular spherical look. However, on the body of this goldfish, what I did was I put a lot of the invisible decreases over here toward this end. That way it didn't taper off evenly. It tapered off in a way that moved closer to the top of the body and tapered more toward that end versus being more uniform and symmetrical, ending up at the bottom over here. All right, so how do you do increases and invisible decreases? I'll show you that now. So on my hook, I already have a magic circle that has 6 single crochets worked into it. That is a very standard way to start off a round piece in amigurumi. All right, and I'll show you how to count these stitches just as a recap. So over here is my working loop that does not count as a stitch. I have over here 1 single crochet, a second one, a third one, a fourth one, a fifth one, and a sixth one. You can tell these apart from each other because each of them has that kind of V shape. So over here, let me show that. So there you go, you have that V shape and it's pointing toward the right. All right, so all of these V shapes are pointing toward the right. Each of those are indicating 1 single crochet. All right, so now I'm going to continue with a standard round piece in amigurumi. Usually after you have your first round of 6 single crochets, you'll have a round of 6 increase stitches. In an increase stitch, all you're doing is putting 2 single crochets into each stitch. So each of these single crochets will have 2 single crochets worked into them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on this next stitch, which will be the beginning of round 2 since I'm completed round 1. So I'm going to insert my hook into this stitch and I'm going to yarn over, pull through those 2 loops, but not my first loop. So I'm just making a single crochet here. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through. All right, so that is 1 single crochet. In the same area where I inserted my hook, I'm going to insert it yet again to make a second single crochet under the same legs of this stitch over here. So just like before, insert my hook, yarn over, pull through those 2 loops of that stitch so that I have 2 total loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull through. So these 2 green stitches were worked into this single blue stitch. So these green stitches that I made are representing the increased stitch, 2 single crochets in 1 stitch. I'm going to repeat that 5 more times for this round, resulting in 12 stitches total. Because each time you use an increased stitch, you are increasing the total stitch count of that round by 1. All right, so over here, I'm going to be working 2 single crochets within this single crochet over here. So insert my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through, into this same blue stitch, insert my hook again, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. All right. And then now I have 4 more to go. So I'll go a little faster. All right, so now I have 3 I need to do. And now I have 2. And this should be my last one if I counted it correctly. All right, so I think I've reached the end of my row. Let me double check. So, like I said, I started off with 6 single crochets in my first round. If I did this correctly, I should have 12 total stitches because I put 6 increases here. So 2 single crochets into each stitch. 6 times 2 gives you 12. So let's see if I did that right. Okay, so here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 stitches. All right. As you can see, my circle evenly grew, creating a larger circle. All right, now I'm going to show you invisible decreases. When I'm talking about invisible decreases, I'm going to be talking about front loops and back loops. So when you are holding your work, the front loops are the loops that are closer to you, so the bottom portion of these V's. So for instance, over here, this part that I'm hooking onto, this would be considered a front loop. This would be considered a front loop, so these bottom portions of these V's. The back loops are these parts over here, so this would be considered a back loop, and this would also be considered a back loop. Again, for the invisible decrease, we're only going to be concerned with the front loops. So what you're going to do when you are completing an invisible decrease is you're going to be taking 2 stitches and essentially combining them into 1 stitch. And this is how you're going to do it. You're going to take your hook and you're going to identify the next 2 stitches that you have not worked into. So I've already worked into this purple one over here, so I'm going to be working in to these 2 next green ones over here. I'm going to insert my hook into only the front loop, and I'm going to leave the back loop alone. All right, so I only have 2 loops total on my hook. Then I'm going to look at my next front loop, and I'm going to push into that one as well. So this yarn is kind of slippery. All right, so here we go. Oh. All right, there we go. Now I have 3 total loops on my yarn. One was the original one that I had just as my working loop. The next 2 loops are the front loops, or the next 2 stitches that were in my round. All right, so now I'm going to yarn over and pull through only those last 2 loops. I won't pull it through the 3rd. All right, now I have 2 loops on my hook instead of 3. From here, I'm going to yarn over and then pull through both loops, completing my invisible decrease. So now, if I count the stitches in this round, I should only have 11 because I have decreased it. So let's see. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So I did this correctly. All right, I'll show that to you again. So I've already worked into this stitch. I'm going to be now working into this green and then the following purple, specifically in the front loops only. So I'm going to push my hook through so that I have the front loop of my green. I'm going to push through so that I have the front loop. Oh, I have the front loop of my purple. And then I also have the working loop on there as well. So 3 loops total. Now I'm going to yarn over, pull through only the first 2 loops so that I have a total of 2 loops now on my hook. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull through for my second invisible decrease. Now I'm going to repeat that 4 more times to finish out my round. All right, so here we go. Front loop, front loop, pull through those 2 loops, yarn over and pull through. I've now completed my 3rd invisible decrease. There's my 4th invisible decrease. There's my 5th invisible decrease. And then finally, my 6th invisible decrease. So my stitch count in the second round went from 12 back to 6 in my 3rd round. So again, to recount these stitches, I have, aside from my working loop, because again, this doesn't count as a stitch, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 stitches. There you go. That is how to do increases and invisible decreases.